Back home, though, in the meantime, and Sky News can reveal which Teal MPs have voted the most with the Greens in this parliament. Let's take you live to Trudy McIntosh. Trudy, you have this exclusive detail. Run us through it.
Yeah, this is the voting records in this parliament of Teal MPs. Now, it's been asked for and commissioned by the Coalition MP Garth Hamilton and done by the Parliamentary Library. It's looked into the votes conducted by a selective member of the crossbench, mainly focused on these Teal contests the Liberals are so keen to win back. And this is trying to put numbers in terms of the coalition behind what they believe in terms of what's driving Teal MPs. Coalitions are trying to paint them as Greens, and they believe these numbers in terms of the voting record in the House in this term help back up that claim. You can see here Sophie Scamps, the member for Kylea, who represents the northern beaches of Sydney. According to the voting record, she's voted on Greens motions 66% of the time where she's been in the chamber. It's important to point out that Teal MPs don't always have to attend every motion, and sometimes they deliberately choose not to do so based on whatever the issue is at that current motion, whether that's a procedural motion. You can see here the numbers, though, vary quite substantially depending on which Teal it is. You can see towards the bottom of that list, Allegra Spender. She's at 49% voting with the Greens. And you can see the contrast to someone like Di Lee in Western Sydney, that independent. She's only voted with the Greens 45% of the time. Flip the script. What about voting on coalition motions during this parliament? You can see Rebecca Sharkey, the Centre Alliance MP from South Australia, her voting record much more supportive of coalition motions. Di Lee, 65% on coalition motions. And you can see the numbers go down from there. Someone like Sophie Scamps, who voted a lot with the Greens, as you saw before, has also supported a lot of coalition motions. And you can see the rest of that list trailing off to someone like Helen Haines, who hasn't voted a lot, around a third of the time with the coalition. This is the breakdown for Sophie Scamps there, 66% on those Greens motions where she's chosen to attend. You can see the difference is quite tight, though, when it comes to Labor versus LNP motions, 53 to 49. In a statement to Sky News today, Sophie Scamps has defended her voting record. She says, "The data shows that I'm a centrist, as my community expects, having supported motions by each of the major parties 50% of the time." It goes on to say as well that my community also elected me to support strong action on climate change and environmental protection. So that would help explain her views in terms of voting on some of those Greens motions. And she adds, "It should therefore come as no surprise that I have supported action on these issues." We saw Peter Dutton, the opposition leader, last week with a full frontal assault on Zali Steggall in that seat of Warringah, which is to the south of Sophie Scamps' seat. Her voting record, interesting as well. Mr Dutton painting her as an extreme Green. That was his word last week in this debate over whether Mr Dutton was in fact a racist. You can see her voting record here, according to this analysis, 58% for the Greens motions, 51% when it comes to government-led motions, and 49% when it comes to LNP motions. Now, this was Parliamentary Library research commissioned by Coalition MP Garth Hamilton, and he's defended today the decision to go out there and look at the voting records of the Teal opponents.
I think this is just important information for voters out there in Australia. Look, the Teals avoided a lot of scrutiny as to what their actual intentions were. They said a lot of fine things, but when they've been tested over 2 years of voting behaviour, they're more likely to support the Greens, and that's not who they sold themselves as.
And I've just received a statement in as well from Kylea Tink. Her voting record, as you saw before, was the second highest amongst those Teals that had been surveyed. As you can see here, every time I vote in the chamber, Ms Tink says, I vote with my conscience and in a way that I believe is consistent with my community's aspirations and ambitions. She goes on to say, on every measure I have attended and voted in Parliament on behalf of my community more often than the Liberal backbencher who commissioned this analysis. Kylea Tink pointing out that Garth Hamilton looked at his own voting record and he didn't appear at some of these votes either. She goes on to say, this analysis shows I've been in the chamber to vote on coalition motions more often than this Liberal backbencher has, while I have supported coalition motions more often than I have supported Labor. It continues here. The question for the Liberal backbencher is, what is he doing while these votes are on? As a backbencher, his only job is to turn up and vote how Peter Dutton tells him to. And it finishes here. So what's more important to his backbencher than voting on behalf of his community? What's he spending his time doing? So you can see here, this is a heated contest politically ahead of the next election between coalition MPs trying to target Teals directly, and Teals that are going to have to hit back against Liberal opponents in a campaign that will come towards them now. They have a record in terms of votes in Parliament. I wanted to show you there's another side of this coin, though. All of the Teals are not homogenous in terms of their views. Have a look at Allegra Spender in Wentworth. She supported Greens motions only 49% of the time, and you can see much more in favour of LMP motions. Currently, that number's sitting at 58%. And a final one to show you, Di Lee, the member for Fowler. She was able to beat Christina Keneally, who was on track to be a Labor frontbencher. Her voting record skews much more towards LMP. So it's a seat-by-seat battle, and certainly these sort of numbers, we've seen them in the US, Ash, as well. Voting Record put out publicly a crude sort of percentage figure put on votes. MPs will tell you it's a lot more complicated when you drill down into vote by vote, but these sort of numbers are often weaponised by political parties in election time.